On March 6, 1989, OSHA published its final rule on hazardous waste operations and emergency response. This document has a direct effect on fire, police, and EMS agencies, and spells out the levels of training that should be given to those persons who will, in the normal course of their duties, happen upon a chemical emergency or incident. This type of person is referred to as a first responder. OSHA separates the first responder into two levels of responsibility: the awareness level and the operational level. This tape will deal with the awareness level first responder who are, according to the standard, to take no further action beyond notifying the proper authorities of the release. The awareness level pertains to those field units not normally involved with the chemical emergency management. The role of the first responder awareness level is to recognize and identify a possible chemical emergency and make the appropriate notifications. This must be done from a passive position. Approaching the incident or taking defensive actions to control the spill or actually mitigate the emergency will take the responder to a higher response level. The awareness level responder sees the incident, makes a call for help, secures the area, and awaits further assistance. In this video, we're going to define hazardous materials, identify the 7 ways hazmats harm people, identify the 4 ways hazmats enter the body, identify the limitations of normal workflows when dealing with hazardous materials, identify the 9 classifications of hazardous materials along with their hazards and potential outcomes, identify the 7 ways to recognize hazmat presence, identify 3 sources for obtaining hazardous response information, and describe the types of information provided by each, show the need for additional resources and making appropriate notifications, and have the ability to initiate scene management.
There are several definitions available for hazardous materials. The Department of Transportation identifies hazardous materials as any product that, when transported in commerce, poses an unreasonable risk to safety, health, or the environment. Another and more direct definition of hazardous materials is any product that, when something goes wrong, will get out of its container and harm or hurt the things that it touches.
There are 7 basic ways that hazardous materials will cause injury. An understanding of these will help the first responder to defend himself from the potential harm. The first way is through thermal injury. The product can, by some means, create a very hot environment, such as a flammable liquid burning, or it can create extreme cold, such as a cryogenic gas, which can have temperatures well below 0. The second way is by chemical injury. A chemical injury can cause a local damage, such as an acid on skin, or it can cause chemical harm in a more systemic way, such as a poison or toxin. The third way that a hazmat may harm someone is through etiological exposures. This would be an exposure to bacteria or viruses such as may be located in a laboratory or medical facility. The fourth area of concern is for radiological exposure. This can occur in a university setting, hospital, doctor's office, or at a transport incident. Asphyxiation is the 5th general way that hazmats can do harm. If an oxygen-displacing gas, such as nitrogen or carbon dioxide, is released into an enclosed space, it will not harm you directly, but the buildup of gas will simply displace the oxygen from the space and cause suffocation. Mechanical injuries can occur from hazardous materials, and this is our 6th area of concern. Mechanical injuries from hazardous materials refers to the blunt or penetrating trauma that can occur when an explosion or other violent release of a hazardous material occurs. The last way in which hazardous materials may harm someone is through psychological harm. This type of harm can occur to responders and victims of the hazmat release. If the responders are made to deal with casualties and widespread destruction from an exceptionally large hazmat incident, these responders may have problems dealing with what they have witnessed. The public may also suffer harm as they will be the ones injured and displaced from their homes, businesses, and loved ones by a large release. Now that we have a basic understanding of how hazardous materials may affect us, it's now time to look at 4 specific routes by which hazmats enter or damage the human body. The first way that hazmats harm the body is by direct contact damage, such as flames contacting and burning the skin, or trauma to the body from an explosive occurrence. The hazardous material can also be absorbed into the body without directly causing contact damage to the skin. Absorption is our second way hazmats enter the body. A poisonous or toxic product may get on your skin and easily pass right through into your circulatory system and cause serious health problems. Inhalation is the next way in which hazardous materials may enter the body to cause harm. A gaseous product need not have any color or odor for it to cause you harm. When hazmats in a gaseous form may be present, you must avoid exposing yourself to the inhalation hazard. Ingestion is another way that hazmats can enter the body. This can occur when a command post or rehab area is established too close to the hazmat release site. The hazmat then can get onto and into the responders by being inadvertently swallowed with food and fluids provided as nourishment.
With the information we now have about how hazardous materials enter the body, it should be easy to see that the normal work clothes and response gear will provide little to no protection from hazardous materials. In fact, the normal work uniform, such as what I'm wearing, will provide no protection to the skin, eyes, or respiratory tract. Parts of the normal work uniform, such as the leather belt and the leather shoes, may readily absorb certain hazardous chemicals and provide for a continuous source of exposure long after you've left the emergency scene. With this in mind, the awareness level responder needs to recognize the emergency exists, call for assistance, and secure the area from a safe distance so as to avoid any exposure to the hazardous chemical.
The first hazard class is explosives. These products are generally defined as those things that can produce an instantaneous release of gas and heat. Explosives have several different divisions called explosives A, B, or C, and blasting agents. No matter which division you're dealing with, if it detonates and you're too close, the results will still be property damage, extensive bodily harm, or even death. The explosive products can detonate when they receive an impact or heat exposure. Examples of this class are dynamite, fireworks, and blasting caps. The second of the hazard classes is gases. This class includes gases that are compressed, liquefied, or dissolved under pressure. There are several divisions of gases. Poisonous gases, which can cause death with only a small exposure. Flammable gases, which are gases that readily burn, such as propane or methane or butane. Non-flammable gases, which despite their names may burn in the right mixture of air. Also, some of the non-flammable gases are quite irritating to the body, such as anhydrous ammonia. Oxidizing gases, such as oxygen that will stimulate rapid combustion. And cryogenic gases, which are stored at temperatures well below zero and can cause severe cold injury. Nitrogen and oxygen are frequently stored in a cryogenic form. The hazards when dealing with gases may vary slightly with each division, but generally you must be alert for cold injuries that can occur if you come in contact with the escaping product, or vapor and air explosion, or boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion, or BLEVE, which is a violently explosive rupture that can occur when certain containers are exposed to fire. The third class is flammable and combustible liquids. Generally, these are liquid products such as gasoline, alcohol, and other liquids that can burn when exposed to a heat source. The main hazard in this class is the fire hazard. However, the responder must also consider the possibility of a flammable liquid also having some corrosive and toxic properties. The fourth class of hazardous materials are flammable solids. Examples in this class are magnesium metal, sodium metal, and titanium. Each one of these solids burns intensely, may be water reactive, toxic, or corrosive. The fifth class, which is generally referred to as oxidizing substances, has two major divisions that the first responder should be aware of. The division 5.1 are those substances that supply oxygen to support the burning process. Examples of this type of product are ammonium nitrate fertilizers and hydrogen peroxide solutions. The next division, 5.2, are called organic peroxides. The organic peroxide class is a shock-sensitive product and may explode if mishandled. Examples of division 5.2 products are peracetic acid and benzoyl peroxide. It's important to note that both divisions of the oxidizing substances stimulate combustion and can be toxic and explosive. Poisonous and infectious substances make up Class 6. The major divisions within this class are Poison A, which are poisonous gases. These gases are typically labeled in Class 2, the gaseous class. Poison A's are very toxic with minimal exposure. Some examples of poison A's are hydrocyanic and phosgene gas. Poison bee substances can cause sickness or death with significant exposure. Some examples of poison bees include arsenic, methyl bromide, and sulfuryl bromide. Etiological agents are substances that can cause human disease. Examples of where this type of hazard can be found include biomedical waste transporters, hospitals, laboratories that deal with human fluids and tissues, or even a sharps box in the rear of an ambulance. In Class 6, all of the poisonous or infectious substances can cause their harm by the routes of absorption, ingestion, injection, or inhalation. Class 7 involves radiological hazards. These substances spontaneously emit ionizing radiation. Depending on the type of radiation involved, alpha, beta, or gamma, the risk can be minimal to catastrophic. Maintaining a safe distance until persons trained to handle such products arrives is the most sensible course of action with these substances. The 8th class of hazardous materials is corrosive products. The corrosive substances can destroy human tissue or cause severe corrosion of steel. Acids such as hydrochloric or sulfuric acids are more damaging to steel. Alkalis such as caustic soda or caustic potash are very damaging to human tissue. The main hazard of both of these is the corrosive capabilities to human tissue and to containers. Also, these products can cause a heat-producing reaction when they come into contact with other products and cause a fire. The last class of hazardous materials is referred to as ORMs, for other regulated materials. These products have the potential for doing harm to containers, the environment, or humans. Typically, they're packaged in a small amount, so their harm is very limited. An example of ORMs can be found at the local garden shop. The pesticides and herbicides that are packaged for consumer use are in such dilute amount and small containers, they're called ORMs. If the same product was at a commercial concentration or stored in a large container, it may then be a Class 6 poison. Other examples of ORMs include tear gas and dry ice. When responding to any type of alarm, the first responder must be alert to the 7 basic clues that will help indicate the presence of hazardous materials. By looking for and recognizing these clues, the responder can help protect himself and other responders from being exposed to the chemical. The 7 basic clues for detecting hazmat presence are as follows: occupancy and location, container shapes, markings and colors, placards and labels, shipping papers and material safety data sheets or MSDS, monitoring and detection equipment, and finally your senses. It has been said that you never know where hazmat releases are going to occur, and therefore you never have any warning. This statement is only part true. For the most part, warning signs of hazmat presence are available. It's just the responders do not notice these signs until it's too late. The first clue that should alert responders to the presence of hazmats is the facility or location of the alarm that you are responding to. For example, as you respond to a fire or EMS call at the local chemical facility in your area, you should be cognizant of the fact that chemicals will be present. This does not mean that the chemicals are involved in this particular alarm. If this alarm does happen to involve chemicals at this facility, at least you are already in the mindset to act accordingly. Be aware of the types of facilities in your first response area, so you're conscious of these facilities and their hazards when alarms occur. Not to be overlooked in your consideration of occupancies that house hazmats are friendly locations such as the local hardware store, pool chemical supply, general merchandise stores that have garden shops, and the sheds or garages of the amateur gardener. The next way to recognize the presence of hazardous materials is to look at the shapes of containers that are involved in the emergency or are nearby. Storage farms for hazardous chemicals are a very large and ominous indicator of hazmats. Bulk storage containers handle liquids at atmospheric pressures. Pressurized fixed storage vessels contain large quantities of gases under pressure. Highway cargo tank trucks that contain gases under pressure will tend to have rounded ends, while cargo tank trucks that contain liquids at atmospheric pressure will be flat-ended with an elliptical shape. Tank trucks that carry corrosive products will be circular with reinforcing bands. The reinforcing bands are to reinforce the container so it can withstand the weight of the corrosive. A tank car carrying a cryogenic gas, that is a gas that's cooled to make it a liquid, will be well insulated and have a control panel for the cooling process on the rear of the vehicle. The configuration of railroad tank cars can yield some information about their contents. For the non-pressurized tank cars, the ends are flat or nearly flat. Also, the non-pressure vessels have their valves exposed on the top of the car and may have bottom fittings as well. In comparison, the pressurized railroad tanker has rounded ends, no bottom fittings, and the valves on top are protected inside a dome. Other types of containers that should alert responders to the presence of hazmats include, but are not limited to, 55-gallon drums, cylinders, boxes, and bags. One last note about container shapes. Do not be led into a false sense of security by friendly truck shapes. These commonly seen cargo trucks carry a variety of hazardous materials on our highways every day. Another clue that should alert responders to the presence of hazmats is the presence of any colors and markings which are not necessarily labels or placards. Included in this category are chemical names stenciled on the side of containers. If there's a company name written on the side of a container, truck, or rail car, and you know this company deals with hazmats, then this should alert the responder to the possible presence of hazmats.
The next way in which to recognize the presence of hazardous materials is to look for the placement of labels and placards on the sides of structures, vehicles, facilities, or containers. There are several specialized labels that the first responder should look for. The NFPA 704M is useful in advising first responders of what general hazards may be posed by the chemical involved. The NFPA 704M is a diamond divided into 4 sections. Each one of the sections has a color code to indicate an area of concern. The blue is health hazards, the red is flammability, the yellow is reactivity, and the white is special hazard considerations. You'll notice that the first 3 sections have got numbers. The numbers range on a scale from 0 to 4. 0 means an area of little or no concern, while 4 would be an area of high or extreme hazard. The white area would have symbols such as water reactivity, corrosivity, or radioactivity, indicating the special hazards for this product. The NFPA 704M is used on fixed facilities and is not used in transport.
Underground pipelines carry a wide range of products including fuels, ammonia, and compressed gases. If a large underground pipe is damaged, hopefully the release will be limited by the required safeguards. Responders should have a working knowledge of any large pipelines in their area and the products it transports.
Placards are 10 3/4-inch diamonds affixed to the front, rear, and both sides of a vehicle, trailer, or rail car that carries hazardous materials.
Labels are 4-inch diamonds printed or affixed to a package next to the product name. You will see some products require multiple labels because of their mixed danger. Both placards and labels are coded in several different ways to indicate to responders and other interested parties the general types of hazards associated with the product. The first coding is the color of the placard or label. For example, the color orange warns of some level of explosive hazard. Red warns of flammability, and yellow is an oxidizer. The next coding is the symbol on the label or placard. On the top of the yellow oxidizer placard, the O is not actually burning. It is meant to show the supporting of combustion. On the black and white corrosive label, the product is being placed on and damaging a hand on one side and a piece of steel on the other. Other warnings found on placards and labels include class numbers and class wordings that correspond with the 9 classifications of hazardous materials that were spoken of earlier. Also, sometimes found on or near the placards or labels will be the 4-digit UNNA number assigned to that product. This 4-digit number may not identify the exact product present, but will classify it into a family of substances that will have the same hazards. The UNNA number, if present, will help you to find the proper guide to use in the Department of Transportation Emergency Response Guidebook. As a last note, placards are placed on vehicles by humans and are therefore subject to errors of omission and commission. In other words, sometimes the placards are not put on correctly or not placed on the vehicle at all. The presence of a placard or label should assist in establishing initial plans for dealing with the emergency, but it must be emphasized that information obtained from placards must be confirmed by using another source.
One of those other sources that may be available to confirm information received off a placard or label is shipping papers, which are required of all commodities when being transported. Shipping papers are often the most important source of information when dealing with emergencies involving hazardous materials in transport.
Each mode of transport has its own different form of shipping paper. On the highway, trucks will be carrying in the cab a bill of lading. The bill of lading will provide information such as who the shipper and intended receiver of the product is, what the product is, and how much is present. In the case of a cargo truck that may carry mixed loads, the bill of lading will list the products present in the trailer. For a rail incident, you should look for the train crewman or conductor to get a copy of the consist. The consist will not only provide a list of what products are present, but will also list what is in each car sequentially. This can be of paramount importance when the train that has a problem has several dozen cars. In the past, responders would have reported to the caboose of a train to meet the conductor. With the diminishing use of the caboose, responders should seek out the train crew near the engine. If you have a ship port in your area and your agency responds to an emergency on a marine vessel, responders should report to the wheelhouse to see the captain or master of the ship. This person will have the dangerous cargo manifest for hazardous products on his vessel. If it is an aircraft that's involved with a hazmat emergency, you should see the pilot or look in the cockpit for the air bill with the shipper's certification for hazardous cargo. Although each mode of transport has a slightly different name for their shipping paper, all of the documents will give responders the same general information: the product's proper shipping name, the hazard classification, an ID number, the number of packages aboard, the package type, and the correct weight of the product. Also, on the larger vehicles, such as ships and trains, the papers will help to identify where the different products are located.
The last of the ways to detect hazardous chemicals is also the most threatening to you. That way is by use of the senses, or biological indicators. A responder should use some of his senses when responding to a hazardous materials incident. The eyes should be used for looking for signs, labels, placards. Common sense should be used to stay out of the chemical or hazardous product once it's suspected to be present or once it's identified. The senses that are the most dangerous for you to use are those that are the doorkeepers to your routes of absorption. What I mean by this is, if you can smell a product, it's entering your upper respiratory tract. If you can touch a product or taste a product, it's on you or in you. A responder should use some of his senses when responding to hazardous materials incidents, but he should use them in a limited way, in a way to protect himself from being exposed to the chemical and to keep himself out of harm's way.
The use of detection equipment is beyond the scope of this video and will not be presented here. By detecting the presence of hazardous materials early in your response, you can set up a safe plan of action and prevent needless exposure to the hazardous material.
Once the first responder arrives at the emergency scene and recognizes the presence of hazardous materials, he needs to know where to turn to gather information to learn how to deal with that hazardous material. Now, admittedly, the awareness level's typical response is going to be recognize the emergency exists, fall back a safe distance, and call for technical assistance, such as a hazardous materials team. However, while awaiting for arrival of that hazardous materials team, there's certain preliminary response information that can be gathered out of resources that are readily available to the awareness level responder.
The first source of information available to the first responder is the DOT Emergency Response Guidebook. This book, available from the federal government, is meant to assist the emergency responder with decision-making during the first few minutes of a hazmat release. The book is put together in a simple format and uses non-technical terms to guide the responder to safe action. The DOT Emergency Response Guidebook is set up to be used as follows. Step 1 is to identify the material by finding any one of the following pieces of information: the 4-digit ID number on a placard or orange panel, the 4-digit UNNA ID number on a shipping paper or package, the name of a material on a shipping paper, placard, or package. Step 2 is to look up the material's 2-digit guide number. This guide number can be found by one of two ways. Use the ID number index, which are the yellow border pages of the guidebook, or use the name of the material index, which are the blue bordered pages of the guidebook. Step 3 is to turn to the numbered guide indicated and read that guide. The guides are found in the orange bordered pages. As a special note, if the index entry is highlighted, turn to the green bordered pages, which is the table of initial isolation and protective action distances. A highlighted index item is exceptionally volatile, and you may need to begin protective actions immediately.
If you're in an emergency scene involving hazardous materials, and you cannot determine the chemical's 4-digit code or its name, but you can see a placard on the side of the vehicle, then the Emergency Response Guidebook can still assist you.
Near the front of the book, there's a table of placards. Turn to this page. Find a sample placard in the book that's similar to the placard at your emergency scene. Then turn to the 2-digit guide number you find next to the sample placard. If you cannot find any way to reference an orange guide, and you believe that your incident involves hazardous materials, turn to guide number 11 and use it until additional information becomes available.
Additional information may come from two sources not yet mentioned in this video. Chemtrek, the Chemical Transportation Emergency Center, is a service of the chemical industry. The job of Chemtrek is to make sure that the chemical industry's capabilities are available to you 24 hours a day.
The resources of Chemtrek are available by calling 1-800-424-9300. The calling agency should attempt to provide as much of the following information as possible: the caller's name and callback number, the name of the carrier or shipper or manufacturer or facility operator, the nature, location, and time of incident, name of material released or any identifying information, container type, rail car or truck number, vessel name, or other vehicle identification. With the information provided, Chemtrek will provide additional response information. The shipper or manufacturer of the material can usually be contacted through Chemtrek for assistance in handling the material. Emergency responders should call Chemtrek for assistance after the scene has been assessed and the immediate needs of those involved have been handled.
If the emergency response involving hazardous chemicals is occurring at a fixed facility, such as a factory or warehouse, then the emergency responder will have another source of information available to him. Material safety data sheets, MSDSs, are required to be available on a large number of hazardous chemicals.
An MSDS will provide the following information about a chemical: identity of the hazardous chemical, health and physical hazards, emergency and first aid procedures, reactivity data, spill or leak procedures, and protective equipment to be worn if handling the chemical. Emergency responders should inquire about material safety data sheets when responding to chemical emergencies at any fixed facility.
The first arriving companies at a hazmat release need to be able to recognize when to call for additional resources and make the appropriate notifications. It may be helpful in the decision-making process to rate the release on a scale of 1 through 3.
A Level 1 emergency is least serious and easily handled. No special expertise is needed. There is very limited or no threat of harm to responders. Examples of this include fuel leaks from trucks or cars, residential gas leaks, or broken containers of consumer commodities. A Level 2 emergency is a limited emergency. It's beyond the capabilities of typical first responding agencies. Level 2 will require response from a properly trained and equipped HazMat team. Examples of this are spills or leaks requiring several block evacuations, several hundred-gallon spills of flammable liquid, major LPG or natural gas leaks, leaks or spills of unknown products, or serious injuries to civilians or responders. A Level 3 is a full emergency. The HazMat release is capable of extreme damage. It will require expertise and resources from state and federal agencies. A Level 3 emergency may require large evacuations and sophisticated leak control methods. Examples of Level 3 include evacuations extending across jurisdictional boundaries, multiple deaths or serious injuries, or spills, leaks, or fires involving hazmats that require multiple alarms.
All emergency response agencies should have a standard operating procedure for dealing with hazardous materials releases. In addition to this, if your agency does not have a hazardous materials response team, then a mutual aid agreement should be in place prior to the emergency so that you know which hazmat team to call in case you roll up on a hazmat incident. Your SOP should state which hazmat team you will call in case of a hazmat incident.
The first arriving units at a hazardous materials release are responsible for several important actions. Not only are first responders responsible for recognizing the problem, removing people including themselves from harm's way, and doing the initial scene research, any emergency that's going to involve more than a couple of companies or different agencies requires the establishment of an incident management system. The incident management system, also known as incident command system, is not only a good idea, but it's required by federal law at any hazmat release. The establishment of an incident command system in its most basic form states that someone is to be designated as being in charge. This person is known as the incident commander and is responsible for decision making. The incident commander is to use information available at the time and establish goals for the outcome of the emergency. All activities are coordinated through the incident commander or a designated officer. Details of establishing and working in an incident management system are beyond the scope of this lesson. With good incident management, any type of response is less chaotic, more safely accomplished, and limited resources are utilized in the best of their ability. Dealing with hazardous materials can be made less dangerous when the few rules shown here today are practiced, and guidelines are in place prior to the emergency ever occurring. It is our hope that if your agency is ever confronted with a hazmat release, you will be prepared to handle it in the safest and best way possible.